this is why I'm talking about this, because all honor to this unnamed black woman. So he said, since I have been Chief Justice, a black woman was brought before me on habeas corpus from jail in Annapolis. This is Annapolis Royal, which is also where the first slaves were in so-called Canada. The return was defective and she was discharged, but as she was claimed as a slave, I intimated that an action should be brought to try the right. So then he said that the person had proved purchase but could not prove that they had rights over her, and the woman was freed. So while he did not directly engage in challenging the legality of slavery, what he would do is bring these property cases, and then when people said this is my property, he would say that they couldn't show the evidence of the person being property. And that is why enslavement actually died out in Nova Scotia much quicker than it did in New Brunswick, when Ludlow, the Chief Justice over there, was really pro-slavery. So the point being, of course, that there is a history of slavery in this city. In fact, our merchants petitioned Parliament against the end of slavery. 20 to 25% of the economy of Halifax was based in what they called the carrying trade, which is that we didn't directly trade in slaves, but the cotton, the rum, the molasses coming back and forth, sugar from the plantations, the warehouses, that we played a huge role as a major port town in slave goods going back and forth. The revenues also went up massively during things like the Confederate War, where we were like running blockades for the Confederates and making money there. So it also reminds us of the history of enslavement in this province. We do have a couple of minutes, so if anybody who shares that history wants to come forward and speak about their own family so that we're being collective and not just lashing. Isaac also may have some additions there.
My name is Isaac Sini. I teach at Dalhousie University. I'm a historian. I'm also a community activist, particularly in the anti-racist, anti-war struggle. I'm here basically to say that I'm here basically because I believe that in order for us to create a world fit for human beings, a world free of exploitation and oppression, we ourselves must be in motion. There's no liberation unless it's self-liberation, no emancipation unless it's self-emancipation. I think what we're doing is we're challenging the dominant historical narrative that erases the history of the oppressed and exploited and glorifies the history of those who have done the exploitation and the oppression. And what it does as well is it basically says that those who have served imperialist and colonialist aims are therefore people to be valorized. And we're saying, no, they've committed crimes against humanity, and they should not be glorified, and we should begin to recognize the crimes of colonialism, the crimes of racism, the crimes of exploitation and oppression.
In Nova Scotia?
In Nova Scotia and across Canada and across the world. Okay. Nova Scotia has a long history of slavery. I think it's important to understand that Canada was a slave society until the 1830s. For example, in 1759, Governor Lawrence of Nova Scotia invited New England planters, that is from the New England part of what is to become the United States, to come to Nova Scotia by offering them free tracts of land. They brought with them hundreds of slaves. So Nova Scotia has a history of slavery, a history of treating people of African descent as people bereft of rights who exist merely to serve the interests of the colonial masters, right? And so there's also a history of laws, right, and institutions to support that enslavement and the disenfranchisement. Even when slavery ended, it's important to understand that there were a constellation of social practices, worldviews and policies and outlooks that lived beyond the lifespan of slavery itself and continue to play a very important role in how people of African descent were treated, their marginalization, disenfranchisement. So there's a legacy of slavery that continues to act as a very strong dead hand, or very living hand, so to speak, in shaping the lives of people of African descent. And we're saying that it's important to understand that there are groups of people who derived long-term advantages from this institution of slavery, and there are groups of people who historically have derived long-term disadvantages from slavery. Those who benefited and those who suffered because of it. And we're here to say that this history not only needs to be acknowledged, but needs to be concretely, shall we say, dealt with and intervened with in serious ways.
My name is Alex Kasnabish. I'm here today because Black Lives Matter, because I think we're living through a historic moment right now, and a long overdue time of social liberation and social change, and I think it's necessary for all of us to be a part of this. I was very grateful to be asked to speak today at the Colonial Walk in Halifax to talk about Winston Churchill. By profession, I'm a professor. That's what I do for my paid work. But really, I just think popular public education for radical social change is what I want to do. So I was so pleased to be able to show up tonight, talk with people, hear what other people had to say about some of the colonial monuments in Halifax, and just hoping to keep this incredible moment in history going, where it feels like the tide is turning and liberation is right around the corner. So I had the great honor of unpacking some of the complicated history about Winston Churchill. I have to say, I guess one thing I would say is separating the complexities of history from the myth-making of our colonial presence. And so Churchill is an important figure, and I'm not even interested in debunking his fight against the Nazis. I think as a wartime leader in England, he did something perhaps unique for the British. But I think that legacy has to be weighed so carefully against the incredible violence he helped unleash against racialized people everywhere, against people who were subject to British rule, who didn't want to be, who sought their own freedom from tyranny and from authoritarianism, that he helped actually impose. And I don't think that we are being revisionist when we call that history into question. In fact, we are the real historians looking for an accurate accounting of where we've come from, who we are, what our societies are about, and also, what we need to know in order to move forward. So much about Churchill's life and his career tells us about the mess that we're in right now. And the same people who make apologies for Churchill are the same ones making apologies for all kinds of white supremacists today. We can have both. We can have an accurate accounting of history, and we can disabuse ourselves the lies of powerful white men saving everybody else from even worse monsters. So I was very grateful to be here and be a part of that. Thank you.